The hardest people to notice are often the ones who spend every day making sure everyone else feels seen. Claire Whitmore never believed that saying until an ordinary Tuesday morning quietly proved it true. The little coffee shop sat across the street from St. Andrew Children's Medical Center, where nurses hurried through the front doors before sunrise. Construction crews grabbed breakfast sandwiches on their way to job sites, and exhausted parents held paper cups of coffee as if warmth alone could carry them through another uncertain day. Claire wasn't there because she needed coffee. She owned enough successful companies that she could have slept until noon if she wanted. Yet every morning at exactly 7:15, she found herself sitting beside the same front window, answering emails she could have answered anywhere else. At first, she told herself it was because the coffee tasted better than the expensive espresso served in her downtown office. Then she admitted another reason had quietly replaced the first. Every weekday at exactly 7:23, the front door opened with the same soft chime. Marcus Bennett stepped inside carrying a faded navy backpack over one shoulder and holding the small hand of an 8-year-old girl whose curly hair bounced every time she laughed. "Morning, Miss Evelyn." Marcus greeted the elderly cashier before she could even speak. "How's your grandson doing after the baseball game?" The old woman smiled so brightly it almost erased the wrinkles around her eyes. "Better now that someone remembers to ask." Marcus grinned. "Tell him next season starts with today." His daughter giggled. "Daddy says baseball fixes almost everything. Only the things coffee can't fix," Marcus answered with a quiet laugh. The little shop laughed with him. Construction workers nodded at him. Nurses waved. Even strangers seemed to relax when he walked by. It wasn't because Marcus was loud. It wasn't because he demanded attention. It was because he carried something rare in a world moving too fast. Calm. Claire noticed the details everyone else missed. His work boots were polished, but old enough to have lived through years of 12-hour shifts. The sleeves of his mechanic's shirt had been carefully stitched where the fabric had once torn. His lunch cooler had cartoon stickers peeling from one corner, clearly placed there by a child who believed decorations could fix anything. Every morning, he bought only one large coffee, never two. Every morning, he split one blueberry muffin perfectly in half before handing the bigger piece to his daughter. Every morning, she smiled as though it were the greatest breakfast in America. Then she hugged him before running toward the school bus waiting across the street. Marcus never walked away until the bus disappeared around the corner. Only then did something almost invisible happen. His shoulders dropped. Just a little. His smile remained exactly where it had always been, but his eyes became strangely distant, as if they were looking somewhere no one else could follow. Claire had spent years reading investors, politicians, attorneys, and competitors. She could recognize confidence, arrogance, fear, and deception within seconds. But whatever lived behind Marcus Bennett's smile was none of those things. It was quieter, older, heavier. It looked less like sadness and more like someone carrying memories that refused to become lighter no matter how strong they grew. The strange part was that no one else seemed to notice. Customers thanked him for holding the door. Children smiled at him. Employees greeted him by name. Everyone saw the smile. Claire couldn't stop seeing the pain hidden carefully behind it. And for reasons she couldn't explain, when Marcus finally picked up his coffee and walked out into the crisp Chicago morning, she realized something unexpected. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about board meetings, quarterly earnings, or billion-dollar negotiations. She was thinking about a man she had never spoken to, and wondering what kind of heartbreak could teach someone to smile so beautifully while quietly breaking inside. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Black Dad Nexus. Every day, we bring you touching stories, emotional love stories, and unforgettable journeys inspired by the moments that change people's lives forever. The next morning arrived wrapped in a pale gray sky that promised rain, but delivered only a cool breeze drifting through the streets of Chicago. At exactly 7:23, the little bell above the coffee shop door rang again. Marcus Bennett walked in wearing the same calm expression Claire had seen the day before. His daughter, Lily, held a folded piece of paper with both hands as if it were the most important treasure in the world. "Miss Evelyn," Lily called happily, "I drew you something." The elderly cashier accepted the drawing with both hands. It was a picture of the coffee shop with smiling stick figures standing outside beneath an enormous yellow sun. "Well," Evelyn whispered, pressing a hand against her heart. "I think this belongs right here." She carefully taped the drawing beside the register where every customer could see it. Marcus smiled at his daughter with unmistakable pride. "Looks like your artwork just became famous." Lily beamed. "Does famous mean more people will smile?" Marcus nodded gently. "That is the best kind of famous." Claire watched from her usual table without pretending she was not watching anymore. She noticed the little things. Marcus always thanked people by name. He always waited for someone else to step through the doorway before entering himself. When another customer accidentally dropped a bag of oranges onto the floor, Marcus knelt without hesitation, gathering every rolling piece of fruit before the embarrassed man could bend down. He accepted nothing except a grateful smile. It seemed effortless, almost natural, as though kindness had become a habit instead of a decision. Yet something continued to puzzle Claire. Every generous gesture cost Marcus time, but he never appeared rushed. Every conversation ended with a smile, but the instant no one looked directly at him, silence settled over his face like a familiar shadow. That morning Claire decided not to leave immediately. Through the wide front window, she watched Marcus walk Lily across the street toward the elementary school bus. Lily stopped halfway and tugged gently on his sleeve. "Promise you will eat lunch today?" she asked with complete seriousness. Marcus laughed softly. "Is that an order?" She crossed her arms. "It is a daughter reminder." He placed one hand over his heart. "Then I officially promise." Only after she climbed safely onto the bus did he turn away. Instead of heading directly toward work, Marcus reached into his backpack and pulled out a small notebook with worn corners. He stood beneath a maple tree, writing something carefully before closing it again. Claire could not see the words, only the tenderness with which he handled the notebook. It looked less like an appointment book and more like something impossible to replace. Curiosity quietly followed her for the rest of the morning. During an executive meeting, while financial reports filled a massive screen and board members debated expansion plans worth millions of dollars, Claire found herself remembering a mechanic with patched sleeves writing beneath a tree. She had negotiated mergers without losing focus. She had convinced skeptical investors to believe in impossible ideas. Yet today she missed two questions because her thoughts had wandered somewhere entirely unfamiliar. Late that afternoon, as she left her office, fate offered another glimpse. Traffic slowed near a neighborhood grocery store, and Claire recognized Marcus loading reusable bags into the back seat of an aging pickup truck. Lily stood beside him holding a bouquet of fresh daisies that clearly came from the discount flower rack near the entrance. "These are for Mom," Claire heard the little girl say as the evening breeze carried the words across the parking lot. Marcus paused for only a heartbeat before answering with the same gentle voice. "She would have loved those." Lily smiled with quiet certainty. "I think she still does." Marcus nodded, but this time the smile on his face seemed to require more strength than before. Claire remained inside her car long after the traffic light turned green, realizing that the notebook, the distant eyes, and the carefully protected smile were all connected to someone whose absence was still quietly shaping every beautiful thing Marcus chose to do. For the next several mornings, Claire stopped pretending that her visits to the coffee shop were accidental. Her assistant quietly rearranged the first meeting of every day, believing the change was simply another adjustment in the demanding schedule of a successful chief executive. Claire never corrected the assumption. Some questions were easier to leave unanswered, especially the ones she could not explain to herself. The familiar rhythm of the little shop became strangely comforting. The hiss of the espresso machine, the laughter of regular customers, the gentle bell above the door. Then, right on time, Marcus and Lily would arrive as though the morning itself had been waiting for them. It was remarkable how much joy one little girl carried into every room. Lily greeted strangers as if they were neighbors she had known for years. She thanked the barista for warming her muffin. She complimented an elderly veteran on his bright red baseball cap. She even waved at delivery drivers passing outside the window. Claire could see exactly where she had learned it. Marcus never instructed Lily to be kind. He simply lived that way until kindness became the language his daughter spoke without effort. One Thursday morning, heavy rain covered the city before sunrise. Wind rattled the windows while people hurried inside, carrying dripping umbrellas. Marcus entered completely soaked, having wrapped his own jacket around Lily instead of wearing it himself. Water dripped from his shirt onto the wooden floor, yet his first concern was kneeling beside his daughter to dry the raindrops from her sneakers with a paper napkin. "You are going to catch a cold," Lily whispered with worried eyes. Marcus smiled. "Not today. Fathers have invisible shields." Lily laughed. "That is not science." "Maybe not," he admitted. "But it is pretty good parenting." Claire smiled before she realized she was smiling. It had been months since something so simple had reached her heart without asking permission. After Lily boarded her school bus, Marcus remained standing beneath the awning outside the coffee shop. He looked up at the gray clouds for several quiet seconds before walking toward a neighborhood auto repair garage 3 blocks away. Claire watched him disappear into the rain. Something urged her to keep watching. That afternoon, while returning from a charity luncheon, Claire noticed the same repair garage. Large glass windows faced the street, allowing customers to see the mechanics at work. She slowed her car almost without thinking. Inside, Marcus moved confidently between vehicles with steady hands and patient focus. A younger mechanic accidentally dropped an entire tray of tools across the concrete floor. The loud crash echoed through the garage. Several customers turned toward the noise. The young employee immediately looked embarrassed. Marcus did not laugh. He did not criticize him. Instead, he quietly knelt beside the scattered tools and began picking them up one by one. "Happens to everybody," Claire saw him say with an easy grin. "The only mistake that matters is refusing to keep learning." The younger man relaxed instantly. Even from across the street, Claire could recognize gratitude replacing embarrassment. It struck her that Marcus seemed to repair more than engines. Somehow he repaired moments. Awkward conversations became easier after he spoke. Worried faces softened when he smiled. Children trusted him. Elderly neighbors greeted him by name. Yet every evening, when his workday ended and he climbed into his aging pickup truck alone, that familiar stillness returned to his eyes. It lingered only for a moment before disappearing behind another reassuring smile. But Claire had begun noticing the exact second it happened. She no longer believed she was imagining it. Whatever sorrow Marcus carried had become part of the quiet rhythm of his life, carefully folded between ordinary moments so that no one else would ever have to carry it with him. Saturday mornings moved more slowly than weekdays, as though the city itself had agreed to breathe a little deeper before another busy week began. Claire rarely worked on Saturdays, but old habits often drew her toward downtown anyway. That morning, however, she found herself taking unfamiliar streets until she reached the small neighborhood park just a few blocks from the elementary school Lily attended. Children raced across the playground while parents talked. Beneath tall oak trees, Claire had no reason to stop, yet she did. She parked beside the curb and decided to walk for a few minutes before returning home. She noticed Marcus almost immediately. He sat on a weathered wooden bench watching Lily climb across the jungle gym with fearless determination. Every few minutes, she looked back to make sure he was still there. Every time, he lifted a hand and smiled. She smiled back and kept climbing. Claire remained several yards away, careful not to interrupt the quiet rhythm between father and daughter. Marcus looked lighter here than he did at the repair garage. The morning sunlight softened the tired lines around his face. For a while, he looked like a man whose entire world fit inside one little girl's laughter. Then Lily spotted a classmate and ran across the playground without hesitation. "Can I play over there, Daddy?" she shouted. Marcus pointed toward the other parents. "Stay where I can see you." "I will." She disappeared into a joyful crowd of children. For the first time all morning, Marcus was completely alone. He reached into the same worn backpack Claire had seen every day at the coffee shop. Slowly, almost carefully, he removed the small notebook with the faded corners. He opened it to a page already covered with neat handwriting. Claire could not read the words from where she stood, but she saw something else. Marcus smiled while reading. Not the reassuring smile he gave strangers. Not the cheerful smile he offered Lily. This one was quieter, fragile, as though he were visiting someone who still lived inside those pages. A gentle breeze lifted the edge of the notebook. Marcus placed one hand across it before turning another page. His lips moved silently. Then everything changed. The smile remained for only another second before fading completely. His shoulders lowered. His eyes closed. He drew one slow breath that seemed far heavier than the morning itself. Claire watched him remove a small photograph tucked between the pages. He looked at it for a long time. No tears fell. No dramatic collapse followed. It was something much quieter than that. His face simply surrendered to the grief he worked so hard to hide from the rest of the world. The kind of grief that no longer shouted because it had learned to whisper. Claire stood perfectly still. Every instinct told her to look away. This was not a performance meant for strangers. It was a private conversation between memory and love. Marcus gently brushed his thumb across the photograph before returning it to the notebook. He closed it with extraordinary care, almost as if he were protecting something alive inside. A few seconds later, Lily came running back, carrying 2 dandelions. "Daddy, look what I found." In one smooth motion, Marcus lifted his head, placed the notebook back inside his backpack, and welcomed her with the same warm smile the world expected from him. "Those might be the prettiest flowers in the whole park," he said. Lily handed him one. "This one is yours." Marcus accepted it like the greatest gift he had ever received. Claire finally understood. His smile had never been fake. It had simply existed beside a sorrow that refused to disappear. Somehow he carried both every single day without allowing one to steal the beauty of the other. And for reasons she could no longer ignore, Claire realized she could not simply return to her own comfortable life and pretend she had never witnessed the quiet strength of a man who continued choosing hope every morning. Before we continue, take a quick second to subscribe to Black Dad Nexus if you have not already. If you love powerful family dramas, surprising stories, real-life inspired journeys, and stories with meaningful life lessons, you are in the right place. Your support helps us create a brand new cinematic story every single day. Monday arrived with bright sunshine, washing away the gray skies that had covered Chicago all weekend, but Claire carried the memory of the park with her into every meeting. Numbers filled presentation screens. Executives debated market strategies. Attorneys reviewed contracts worth millions of dollars. She answered every question with her usual precision, yet somewhere in the back of her mind, she kept seeing a weathered notebook, a carefully protected photograph, and a father who had mastered the impossible art of smiling while carrying invisible weight. By late afternoon, she made a decision that surprised even herself. She canceled her private driver, left the office early, and walked 3 blocks to the little coffee shop instead. The evening crowd had begun replacing the morning regulars. Students worked quietly with laptops. Hospital staff stopped in before night shifts. Marcus stood near the pickup counter waiting for 2 sandwiches wrapped in brown paper. Lily sat beside the window reading a library book with complete concentration, occasionally whispering difficult words to herself before smiling proudly each time she pronounced them correctly. Claire hesitated at the entrance. She had spent years speaking before shareholders, government officials, and international business leaders without the slightest trace of nervousness. Yet introducing herself to one ordinary father suddenly felt far more complicated. She ordered a cup of coffee she did not really want and noticed Miss Evelyn carrying a tray toward Marcus. Before the elderly cashier could reach him, one of the paper cups tilted dangerously near the edge. Marcus stepped forward just in time to steady the tray with one careful hand. "Got it," he said with an easy smile. "Looks like Monday almost won." Evelyn laughed. "You always seem to arrive 1 second before disaster." Marcus shrugged. "Maybe I have good timing." Claire smiled quietly. "No." He simply paid attention. As Marcus gathered the sandwiches, he noticed Lily watching an elderly gentleman struggle to zip his heavy winter coat. Before Marcus could even speak, Lily walked over and gently helped the man pull the zipper all the way to the top. The gentleman thanked her warmly. Lily pointed toward her father. "He says helping people is like planting trees. You might never sit in every shade, but somebody will." Marcus lowered his eyes with quiet embarrassment. "She remembers everything," he admitted. Claire felt those simple words settle somewhere unexpectedly deep inside her. She looked around the coffee shop. There were expensive watches, tailored suits, polished shoes, and people discussing promotions and investments. Yet the richest lesson spoken all afternoon had come from an 8-year-old girl repeating something her father had taught her without ever realizing someone else was listening. As Marcus and Lily prepared to leave, Miss Evelyn quietly slipped an extra chocolate chip cookie into Lily's bag. "For later," she whispered. Lily immediately looked toward her father. Marcus smiled gently. "What do we say?" Lily hugged the cookie against her chest. "Thank you very much." Then she paused for a second before breaking the cookie perfectly in half. She offered one piece back to Evelyn. Sharing makes everything taste better. The old cashier laughed with moist eyes. Your daddy is raising a remarkable young lady. Marcus answered softly. She teaches me every day too. Claire watched them walk toward the door. She almost called out, almost introduced herself, almost asked the 100 questions quietly collecting inside her heart. Instead, she noticed something lying beneath the chair where Marcus had been sitting. It was a folded grocery receipt. She picked it up automatically, intending to throw it away before realizing several handwritten notes covered the empty side. Milk, bread, Lily's favorite apples, science project supplies, daisy seeds. At the bottom, written in careful block letters, was one final reminder. Do not forget to smile for Lily. Claire stared at those 6 words for several long seconds. Suddenly she understood that Marcus did not smile because life was easy. He smiled because somewhere along the way he had made a promise to protect one little girl's childhood, even on the days when his own heart still quietly carried the echoes of loss. The grocery receipt stayed folded inside Claire's coat pocket for 3 days. She could have thrown it away the moment she discovered it. Instead, she carried it everywhere without fully understanding why. Between meetings, she found herself unfolding it, reading the simple shopping list, then stopping at the final reminder written in steady handwriting. Do not forget to smile for Lily. Every time she read those words, they seemed to mean something different. They were not instructions for happiness. They were evidence of discipline. Marcus had turned love into a daily promise, even when no one was watching. Thursday evening brought an unexpected delay at the office. By the time Claire finally left downtown, rush hour traffic had nearly disappeared. Rather than take the highway home, she drove through the quieter neighborhood streets that had somehow become familiar over the past few weeks. As she passed the public library, she noticed a weathered pickup truck parked beneath a streetlight. Marcus stood beside the return box, helping Lily stack several library books into her backpack. She recognized titles about planets, inventors, and wildlife. Lily looked up at the darkening sky. Daddy, can we still plant the daisy seeds tomorrow? Marcus smiled. If the weather behaves. And if it rains? She asked. Then flowers will have exactly what they need. Lily considered that answer carefully before nodding. Everything good needs patience, right? Marcus laughed softly. You have been listening. I always listen. Claire remained inside her car, unnoticed, watching one of the simplest conversations she had ever heard somehow become one of the most meaningful. After returning the books, Marcus and Lily walked to a nearby grocery store carrying only a reusable canvas bag. Nearly 40 minutes later, they came back with the same bag, now filled just enough to hold a few essentials. Marcus checked every receipt carefully before placing it into his wallet. Not with frustration, simply with responsibility. As they reached the truck, Lily suddenly pointed toward a community bulletin board outside the library. A colorful flyer announced the school's annual family science fair the following Saturday. Daddy, I forgot, she whispered. My volcano project. Marcus's expression remained calm, but Claire noticed the tiny pause before he answered. We still have time. Mrs. Carter said we need supplies. Then we will figure it out. Lily looked down at her shoes. They cost money. Marcus gently knelt until they were eye level. Listen to me, sweetheart. A good project is not about buying the most expensive things. It is about using your imagination. You have plenty of that. Lily smiled again, reassured almost instantly. They climbed into the pickup and drove away. Claire remained parked for another minute, staring at the colorful flyer fluttering gently in the evening breeze. The next afternoon, she attended a fundraising event hosted by one of her foundations. Tables displayed expensive silent auction items. Guests discussed generous donations, while photographers documented every smiling face. Yet Claire could not stop thinking about one little girl worrying over a science project and one father quietly refusing to let financial limits become emotional burdens. As the evening ended, each guest received an elaborate gift basket prepared by the event sponsors. Claire looked at hers for only a moment before calling her assistant. Would you mind finding the elementary school listed on this address? She asked, handing over the photograph she had quietly taken of the library flyer the night before. Her assistant looked confused. Are we sponsoring something? Claire glanced out the window, watching the city lights shimmer against the skyline. Not exactly, she answered softly. I think someone simply deserves a little more room to keep believing that imagination is enough. Saturday morning arrived with clear blue skies and the kind of crisp autumn air that made every color seem brighter. The parking lot of Lincoln Elementary buzzed with excited families carrying poster boards, cardboard models, paint supplies, and carefully protected science projects. Claire parked across the street wearing simple jeans, a light sweater, and a baseball cap, hoping to blend into the crowd. For the first time in years, she attended an event where no one expected a speech, a donation, or a business announcement. She only wanted to watch. Inside the school gymnasium, colorful displays stretched across long folding tables. Children proudly explained experiments about volcanoes, weather, electricity, and the solar system. Parents applauded every presentation with equal enthusiasm, whether it was polished or held together with tape and hope. Claire quietly walked through the rows until she spotted Lily arranging a small display covered with neatly handwritten labels. Marcus stood beside her, adjusting a paper. Sign that read, "How wildflowers help bees and butterflies." The project was simple. Small flower pots lined one side of the table. Hand-drawn diagrams filled the center. Tiny photographs of neighborhood gardens completed the display. Nothing looked expensive. Everything looked loved. "Daddy," Lily whispered nervously, "what if it is too small?" Marcus crouched beside her with the same calm patience Claire had come to recognize. "Do you remember what we talked about?" Lily nodded slowly. "The biggest ideas do not always need the biggest displays." Marcus smiled. "Exactly. Your project tells the truth. That is always enough." Before the judging began, the school principal stepped onto a small stage near the front of the gymnasium. "Before we start," she announced, "we have one wonderful surprise." Earlier this week, an anonymous donor contacted our school after learning that many students complete science projects using only recycled household materials because supplies can be expensive. Starting today, every student participating in our science program will receive a learning kit filled with books, experiment materials, and supplies to take home. Excited applause filled the room. Volunteers rolled several carts into the gym, each loaded with colorful boxes decorated with stars, microscopes, and rockets. Children's eyes widened with amazement. Parents exchanged grateful smiles. Marcus looked around, pleasantly surprised, then turned toward Lily. "Looks like a lot of young scientists are going to have some fun." Lily squeezed his hand. "Maybe next year I can build something even bigger." "Maybe," Marcus answered. "But promise me one thing." "What?" "Never believe that bigger automatically means better." Lily nodded with complete seriousness. "I promise." Claire stood near the back of the gym, watching volunteers distribute the learning kits. She had insisted her foundation remain completely anonymous. She did not want gratitude. She wanted possibility. As the event continued, judges stopped at Lily's table longer than expected. One elderly science teacher smiled while examining her carefully labeled flower pots. "Tell me," he asked, "why did you choose flowers instead of volcanoes or rockets?" Lily looked proudly toward her father before answering. "Because flowers help things grow even after people stop looking at them." The judge paused, clearly touched by the answer. Marcus lowered his eyes with a quiet smile, but said nothing. Claire felt something shift inside her once again. She had spent years believing success was measured by buildings, profits, and headlines. Yet one little girl had just described kindness more beautifully than any leadership book she had ever read. As families slowly gathered their projects at the end of the event, Lily received a small blue ribbon recognizing outstanding creativity. She ran into Marcus's arms with pure excitement. He lifted her off the floor, laughing with genuine joy. For a brief moment, the quiet sadness Claire had watched for weeks seemed completely absent. Then Marcus gently set Lily back down and looked around the crowded gym, as though silently wishing someone else could have witnessed this beautiful day too. Claire understood immediately who that missing person must have been, and without expecting anything in return, she quietly smiled from across the room, grateful that hope had found its way into one more ordinary Saturday. The following Tuesday morning, the coffee shop felt exactly as it always had. The aroma of fresh coffee drifted through the room. Miss Evelyn greeted customers by name. Nurses hurried in before their shifts. Construction workers laughed over breakfast sandwiches. Yet something inside Claire had changed. She was no longer simply observing Marcus Bennett's life from a quiet distance. She had begun measuring her own life against his without meaning to. Success had always filled her calendar. Somehow, It had left very little room in her heart. At precisely 7:23, the familiar bell rang above the door. Marcus and Lily stepped inside, smiling at everyone as always. Lily proudly carried her blue ribbon folded inside a clear plastic sleeve. "Miss Evelyn," she announced excitedly, "I won outstanding creativity." The elderly cashier clapped her hands together. "I knew you would." Lily shook her head with a laugh. "Daddy said the ribbon is nice, but finishing the project mattered more." Evelyn looked toward Marcus. "Sounds exactly like something you would say." Marcus smiled modestly. "Ribbons stay on shelves. Confidence stays inside children." Claire quietly repeated those words in her mind. Confidence stays inside children. She wondered how many boardroom speeches she had delivered over the years without ever saying something half as meaningful. As Marcus reached the counter, Miss Evelyn handed him his usual coffee. "Someone already paid for this," she said with a puzzled smile. Marcus blinked. "There must be a mistake." "No mistake. They asked not to leave a name." Marcus looked around the room. Every customer seemed busy with their own morning. Claire lowered her eyes toward her laptop screen before he could accidentally meet her gaze. Marcus hesitated for a moment, then accepted the cup with quiet gratitude. "Well," he said softly, "I hope whoever they are has a wonderful day." Claire smiled almost invisibly. She had expected nothing in return. Hearing those simple words somehow felt like more than enough. After Lily left for school, Marcus remained inside the coffee shop a little longer than usual. Instead of rushing to work, he sat near the window with his notebook resting unopened beside his coffee. For several peaceful minutes, he simply watched people passing outside. Claire noticed there was no sadness on his face that morning, only thoughtful silence. Finally, she gathered enough courage to walk toward his table. "Excuse me," she said gently. Marcus looked up with the same calm expression he offered everyone. "Good morning. Would you mind if I sat here for a minute?" He glanced toward the empty chair and smiled politely. "Not at all." Claire placed her coffee on the table and sat down. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The silence felt surprisingly comfortable. Marcus broke it first. "I think I have seen you here before." Claire laughed softly. "Probably more than once. You always sit by the window. And you always notice more than people expect." Marcus smiled at that. Occupational habit. Mechanics spend a lot of time looking for small details. Claire nodded thoughtfully. Business leaders should probably learn the same skill. Marcus chuckled quietly. Maybe everybody should. Their conversation remained simple. They spoke about Chicago weather, the neighborhood library, and how quickly children seem to grow. Marcus never asked what Claire did for a living. Claire never asked about the notebook or the photograph she had once seen. Neither one reached into the other's private sorrows. Instead, they shared something far more unusual. They shared a peaceful moment with no expectations attached to it. As Marcus stood to leave for work, he paused beside the table. "Thank you," he said warmly. Claire looked slightly surprised. "For what?" He smiled the same gentle smile that had first captured her attention weeks earlier. "Some people feel silence because they are uncomfortable with it. You did not. That is rarer than you might think." Marcus walked out into the bright morning sunlight, leaving Claire alone beside the window once again. But this time, the quiet between them no longer felt like distance. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them had been searching for, yet both of them had quietly needed all along. Autumn slowly surrendered to early winter, and the little coffee shop across from St. Andrew Children's Medical Center continued welcoming familiar faces every morning. Some things never changed. Miss Evelyn still greeted everyone like family. Nurses still hurried toward another long shift. Construction workers still joked over steaming cups of coffee. Marcus Bennett still arrived at exactly 7:23 with Lily beside him, and somehow his quiet smile still made the room feel warmer than the coffee ever could. Yet the lives of three people had changed in ways no calendar could measure. Claire no longer came because she was curious. She came because the peaceful conversations she shared with Marcus had become the calmest part of her week. They never spoke about wealth. Marcus still had no idea that the woman sitting across from him led a successful company whose headquarters overlooked half the city skyline. Claire never mentioned it because she realized something unusual. Marcus treated everyone with the same respect before knowing anything about them. She did not want that to change. One snowy morning, Lily rushed into the coffee shop carrying another folded drawing. She carefully placed it on the table between Marcus and Claire before climbing onto her chair. "I made this yesterday," she announced proudly. Claire unfolded the paper. 3 people stood beneath a bright yellow sun outside a tiny coffee shop. One figure wore work boots. One held a coffee cup. Between them stood a smiling little girl holding both of their hands. Above the drawing, written in careful second-grade handwriting, were the words, "The people who make mornings better." Claire looked quietly toward Marcus. He seemed just as surprised. "Looks like you included Miss Claire," he said gently. Lily nodded without hesitation, because she always smiles with her eyes. The room became very still. Marcus glanced at Claire, then back at the drawing. "That is a beautiful compliment," he said softly. Claire felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. No board award, business magazine cover, or public recognition had ever reached her heart the way those simple words did. A week later, the first snowfall of the season covered the sidewalks in white. Marcus and Lily stopped outside the coffee shop before crossing toward the school bus. Lily laughed while catching tiny snowflakes on her mitten. Marcus looked upward, smiling peacefully. Claire stepped outside carrying her own cup of coffee. For the first time, none of them seemed in a hurry. "Beautiful morning," Claire said. Marcus nodded. "Snow has a way of making everything slow down." Claire looked at the fresh blanket of white covering the busy street. "Maybe people need that once in a while." Marcus smiled. "Sometimes the world reminds us to notice what has been there all along." The school bus arrived. Lily hugged her father, waved enthusiastically at Claire, and disappeared inside. Marcus watched until the bus turned the corner, just as he always did. Then he turned toward Claire. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. "Of course." He looked down at the warm coffee cup in his hands before speaking. "For a long time, I thought healing meant forgetting the people we miss." He paused, watching a single snowflake melt against his sleeve. "Now I think it means learning to keep loving them while still making room for new kindness." Claire understood without asking another question. She smiled gently. "I think that is one of the wisest things I have ever heard." Marcus chuckled quietly. "Lily probably taught me that too." They stood together in comfortable silence as snow continued falling around them. No promises were made. No dramatic declarations filled the morning air. Life did not suddenly become perfect. Marcus still carried memories. Claire still carried responsibilities. But neither of them carried those burdens quite as alone anymore. Across the street, the coffee shop bell rang again as another customer stepped inside. Another ordinary day had begun. Yet somewhere between a shared cup of coffee, a little girl's drawings, and a series of quiet mornings, 2 strangers had reminded each other that the greatest gift one human being can offer another is not wealth, advice, or rescue. It is simply the willingness to truly see them. And sometimes, being seen is where hope quietly begins again. Every story leaves us with a question. What would you have done if you were in their place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We would love to hear your perspective. If you enjoy touching stories, inspiring life journeys, emotional family dramas, and unforgettable love stories, do not forget to like, subscribe to Black Dad Nexus, and turn on notifications. A brand new cinematic story is waiting for you tomorrow.